All right, this week's topic is
Yeah.
defense. I grasped this concept from a mentor of mine, Ron Ecker. I've mentioned before the three pillars of defense, like my greatest simplification of defense. And so the three pillars are containing the ball, ideally one-on-one, so we don't need help, contesting all shots as much as possible to create more missed shots, and then rebounding or cleaning up the mess, as I like to call it with players, right? If we do the first two, we get a lot more of the third, and our offense benefits a lot. And so, second part of the day, we're going to talk about connecting that defense to offense, playing fast and slow, playing at a pace based on the possession type and how we got the ball in our hands, and then trying to calibrate attack speed. And so I'll dive into that as we get going. Let's talk about containing first. I have a phrase I use with players a lot. Defense dictates direction, right? We can't always dictate the timing or the spacing or a lot of the other aspects that happens when we're playing defense. We're left reacting a lot. But direction is one thing that we can control. And we do that with floor position first. So where are you in relation to the basket and the ball, angle of the floor, all of that. Second is body position. How are you positioned with your feet and your bend of your knees and your stick arm is what we like to call it. And then thirdly is footwork. And we have two letters of the alphabet we use for footwork. I'll get into in a sec. But really, what I want to talk about with containing is the floor position strategy. Where's the player positioned for being a defender? Where's the ball and where do we want the ball to go? Right. And so a lot of players, a lot of coaches rather, will mandate, force the ball baseline. If the ball is caught on a wing, we're telling the defense to force it down the baseline. And I'm actually an advocate of the opposite. Like a lot of things, I have a contrarian idea about this, but I actually got this from another mentor, Noah LaRoche, who is a longtime Seacoast development coach. Now spends his time in LA for the most part, working with NBA players. But he had the ultimate simplification for this is, where does the ball want to go? They want to drive away from the pass to space. And so we just flip the script on defense. We want to force the ball back toward the pass and where it came from, with the theory being all the defense was shifted toward that ball when the ball passed. All the defense is coming from that direction, and therefore, if we force the drive back toward the pass, they're going to run into more bodies, more traffic, more defenders able to help sooner than forcing them toward away from the ball or toward space, which is ultimately what we're doing with that baseline strategy is we're forcing them toward space where the theory is they're going toward the corner where they don't have as much options, but what we really find is they're going toward more space. And so they're able to create more havoc for the defense, cause longer defensive rotations to stop them, and really just create a lot more complications defensively than forcing them toward the pass where they get stopped sooner. Body position, we talk about low versus high hands, like the classic closeout drill where people shuffle their feet and swing both arms up, right? Is really ludicrous in my mind. Like nobody does that in a game. And we practice it that way and mandate players practice it that way, but they know it's never going to happen in a game, so they're never bought into that. And so I think of that as a contradiction where we're asking them to be low with their body and high with their hands, and like it just doesn't work. And so what we work on is a stick arm so we can stay low with our body, but have an arm at the ball height. And so then when they're going to go up to shoot it, we can just match the height of the ball. We can contest it easily, which is really the goal of those two arms up is to contest it. But we're not doing a good job of either, right? And what we find is with their hands up, they tend to come up out of their stance more and they get blown by on a drive. And they're also restricted, just body constraints. They're not able to jump very effectively because their arms are already up. And so we just simplify that. We want to be low. Defending the drive is the primary goal. And we have a stick arm that's then able to match the ball and go up and contest it fairly well. And then we talk about which foot is ready to move, which takes us to our two letters of the alphabet. I call the L step and the X step. It's been my own evolution of thinking to try to simplify this. We're working commonly with 11, 12, 13-year-old players, and, they are normally told they must always slide, slide, only ever slide, and slide faster and slide better and slide more. And coaches kind of handicap them in my mind by only allowing them to slide when they're playing defense. And so the L step is a slide. It's a transition. If you think of an L shape, it's just a 90-degree corner. We're going forward to close out on the perimeter, and then we are sliding sideways to cut off that drive. And with the floor position, the body position, the strategy stacked on this of forcing the ball back toward the pass, we can do a lot of good work by anticipating that direction they're going to drive. If we overplay one side, we know they're going to have to drive the other side, then our efficiency of footwork can be a lot better, making that L-shaped step from forward to sideways, because we know where they're going to have to drive before they decide that they're going to drive that way. So developing that defensive anticipation. And then the X step is probably the best single tool I could give any player, or for you guys that I could pass on to you to give to any player, is just turning and running. And so I call it toes and nose together, right? If we're talking about our tag point from a couple weeks ago, we want to make something really specific that they can do and we can see when they do it. Because how I explain this to players is if you slide and the ball handler runs, he's going to take twice as much space per stride as you are, and you're going to lose the race, right? No matter how good of an athlete you are, you're sliding 3 feet at a time per step. He's running 6 feet at a time per step, and we lost the race and he scored, right? At best, we end up being like an escort to the basket. So the X step just means we are also running by turning our hips, our toes, and our nose and taking a full running stride or two. We're able to get back in front of the ball and then turn back to what we call chest walls, like our ideal defensive position. Our chest is between their line of drive and the basket, and they now have to shoot over us or change direction around us, and we can go back to sliding and react and anticipate what they're going to do next. And so, really great framework. If you can just simplify all of defensive footwork is down to getting good at these two transitions, right? Because it's not really, we don't need to practice sliding. Like I see a lot of practices slide the whole length of the court at one speed in one direction up and down, right? And it's really like we're rarely taking two steps without changing either speed or direction. And so we need to get good at, I'm running forward, I'm sliding sideways, or I'm sliding sideways, I'm running sideways farther to catch up and cut off the ball. Or then I'm transitioning back the other way, right? Ball handler makes a crossover. I gotta open drop step, open slide the other direction, or I gotta turn and toes and nose, X step run the other direction again to cut off the ball. And so we just work on that transition. I get good at changing forward to sideways, changing sideways to run sideways to slide, slide back to run. Just get good at all possibilities that happen there. And suddenly your players are a lot better equipped to just stay in front of the ball one on one. And I'd say the second most important after the X step is what I already mentioned is the stick arm, which we use both to as a height, measurement height cue to get in front of the ball so that we can keep in front of it and contest it, but also a measuring stick of how close we're getting to the ball. Because one of the biggest reasons players get beat a lot that I see is they're closing out until their nose is to the ball, and therefore the ball handler's first step is already past them, right? A stick arm just allows us a cushion of space and also time. Regardless of how athletic we are, we need some reaction time because we are always reacting to what the ball handler does. And so having a stick arm of space just means they are never getting past us with their first step, and we have time to react, adjust, and recover and have a lot better chance of staying in front of the ball. Um, Anybody have any questions on that so far? Some of this I know would be more helpful to be able to demonstrate in person, which I would like to get a time with our group here that's been on the call to do an in-person kind of walkthrough with some of the concepts as we get toward the end of October here. But any questions or comments on the idea of containing like that?
No, it all makes sense.
Cool. Thanks, Jay. Dana or Chris, you got anything?
No, it makes sense to me. I remember seeing a lot of this in action when Ellie came out for a couple of her programs.
Cool. Yeah, that's right. We did the footwork course and worked through some of that defensive stuff. Good.
Yep.
All right, so then second pillar is contesting. And so our goal here is to just annoy and distract the shooter. So kind of the player instinct is to always go for a block, right? Which gets us into a lot of trouble. We're either too close again, where we killed our stick arm distance and we're going to get beat in a different way because we're too close trying to block them. Or we are jumping from far away, we're jumping into the shooter or past the shooter and we're ending up out of position or we're even fouling the shooter by jumping forward too much. And so, talking about targeting first, what are we contesting? The distance, how close we need to be, and then the timing of when do we jump. Kind of the three most important aspects that if we get those good and consistent with players, then they have a pretty good framework to stay in front of the ball and still be able to contest. So, what are we contesting? The vision versus the ball. So I call this the rainbow versus the laser, right? The path of the ball is a big parabola, rainbow shape, way up high to drop in the basket. Contesting the line of that ball would be very difficult for most players, regardless of their size and length and ability of jumping. But to contest the vision of the shooter is like a laser beam. From their eyes to the rim is a straight line that just about anybody can reach. And so I'll walk through this with players that are way shorter than me. Like I stand still at the 3-point line and they come out until I say their hand reaches my line of sight. And usually they can do that without jumping. And then when they have the ability to jump, it means from even farther away, they could jump and still reach the line of sight. And so, really, what we're talking about here is just the probability of a made shot. And so, we don't need to block the shot to impact misses, right? A visual distraction in the eye line of the shooter is enough to cause usually a 20 up to 50% impact on misses, right? So, if you had a really good 40% 3-point shooter and you get them to miss half as or twice as much, so they make half as many, right? We just went to a 20% 3-point shooter and we probably won that game if that was one of their better players, right? And so we connect this again to the stick arm. We match the height of the ball. As they go up, we go up. And then if we want to contain the drive outside the paint and contest the shot, then we're forcing really bad shots every time without getting beat or fouling, right? And so, like, if we do a good job getting there close enough and contesting so they don't want to shoot the catch, then they're trying to drive and we're containing the drive with our footwork we just talked about. And now they're probably settling for off the dribble, mid range, plus our contest, and they're just going to miss a lot more shots. And so we like to kind of work through this in an exaggerated scenario where the player is actually under the basket, like charge circle deep, so that they really can't make it no matter how fast they run or how high they jump. They're not going to make it to block the shot. So it just kind of highlights that that is impossible. Therefore, the strategy is to contest the line of sight instead. And then we're just working on timing. So I'll spin out a pass to myself. I'll catch and shoot it in rhythm without pausing or faking or anything else to complicate it and just let them run to try to get as close as possible and still go up and meet my line of sight with their contest. And then as we refine that over a few minutes, we work on making sure that when they jump and land after their jump to contest it, they are still a stick arm away from the ball. So that way, if I did pump fake and they jumped too early and flew in the air, when I come back down from my pump fake, they come back down from their jump and they're still in a stick arm away position and I can't beat them with my drive. That's like the ultimate ideal here is to be able to balance both of these so that we're not overplaying the contest and getting out of position where we get beaten with a drive. And we're also not timidly trying to stay back so we don't get driven on and end up allowing shots to go over our head, which is kind of where a lot of players end up is like the worst of both worlds. They're doing some of one and some of the other, and they get beat on both ways and kind of, get frustrated with that. Coaches certainly get frustrated with that because we're either not making an effort to contest a good shooter or we're overplaying a bad shooter and they're driving us. There's all kinds of variables in there that can really be a frustration. So distance, how close do we need to be? We talk about it. I was able to use the social distancing measurement. Everybody was familiar with that going back to COVID times. But a 6 feet bubble of space, right? So like if you're outside of 6 feet, we call it a 0 level rating. So you did not make an effort to contest them if you're outside of 6 feet. if you're inside of 6 feet, but your hand is not up, or you're outside of 6 feet and maybe you tried, but you really didn't get there, then it's a level one. And it's a level two if you're both inside that 6 foot bubble and your hand is up, right? You're making an effort to contest their line of sight. And so defensively, we want to get all level twos as much as possible. And basically, stats study we did a while back, if you can get about 70% of all shots taken by your opponent to be a level two contest, then you win the game about 95% of the time, right? It has that big of an impact. It's just like we're getting layups, they're getting contested off the dribble twos, and suddenly, that difference in points value starts to stack up. And we'll talk about the real deep math about that in coming weeks here. But again, with contesting, we're just trying to get to that 6 foot mark and get our hand up every chance we get. And so that kind of gives players a incentive. So going back to our tag point and trying to reward or tweak our knobs and dials, I described it as to give them a higher incentive to do the behavior we want, even if it doesn't produce the outcome yet that they want to see, right? This is a way to really emphasize the defense. Like, we're looking for level two ratings and we're scoring this game based on this. And so, like, Johnny got a 2, Jimmy got a 1, that was a 0. We're playing to 5. Somebody else needs to get a 2 contest. Got it. Game over. We scored 5 defensive contest points. And really just incentivize and kind of change, I guess the dynamic as we see older players progress. They're very peer motivated. They don't want to look silly having given a lot of effort and still have the shot made in their eye, right? They really try to contest it. Guy made it anyway. Like that's like the ultimate what's the word nowadays? The aura killer, right? You have good aura. He just killed your aura, whatever that is. If you're making a lot of effort and you still get beat, right? That's a big negative perception of your peers. Nobody wants that. And so this is a way to kind of incentivize them to still give an effort and talk about the probability of their shot missing by just consistently contesting shots all the time and being okay. Like he's still going to make 20% as a really good shooter, but I'm going to be there every time in his face and he's not going to make his normal 40% that he otherwise would. And so, just having a rating system, you could probably tweak this and even come up with your own. But this is another one I took from my mentor Ron Ecker. Just having a 0, 1, or 2 means they are incentivized to go give that effort instead of what a lot of players I see do is like they're on their way out to the shooter, but shot goes up and they knew they couldn't block it, so they gave up, turned around, and watched the shot hit the rim instead of doing anything to try to get in the line of sight of the shooter. And then timing. So this is maybe the most important factor of this. And I like to just compare like body mechanically what's faster and slower. So we'll talk about the shooter is always going to be slower to go up from a catch or a dribble into their shot because they have the ball and moving the ball slows them down. It's going to be slower than the defender just jumping and meeting them, which means we can be what we call be the second jumper. We can wait until they're on their way up and go up and meet them. And again, we're decreasing the difficulty here by just trying to reach their line of sight, which is pretty easy, right? I don't have to go for the ball. I don't have to block the ball. I just need to go get my hand in their line of sight at the time they're about to release it, and I have an impact on the shot enough to make that worthwhile. And back to the stick arm, we're trying to track that height of the ball, just tracing it wherever it is. And then when they go up, we go up, and our jump is able to reach their line of sight, probably underneath the ball by 8 to 10 to 12 inches. So, because we're not trying to block the ball, we can find their line of sight and have an impact on it. So these three aspects, if you really get players understanding the targeting, right? What we're trying to contest being the line of sight, how close they actually need to be to have an impact, and then the timing of going up after the shooter being the second jumper and reaching that line of sight, then, players will start to buy into that, especially if you get an incentive, like I just said. If you're rewarding them every time they do it with 2 points in a game, whatever game you were playing, doesn't really matter. It's just like, hey, by the way, defense can win this game if they get 5 points from our contest scoring system. right? So any questions about that one before I move on to rebounding? Cool. I'll take silence as a no. No questions. All right, rebounding. Get the ball. So one of my pet peeves of rebounding, and I'll talk through why I think boxing out is kind of outdated. But if you think of back to the 80s and 90s, our early days for our generation and even before us, boxing out was a really important thing because of the proximity to the basket and the physicality, right? It was like really physical basketball back then compared to what it's evolved to now. And, more guys packed in the paint doing a box out to really get the ball. And nowadays, there's a lot more spacing. Like we're spread out a lot farther, and it's probably only one out of our five players on the team that's around the basket close enough with another big body to where boxing out makes sense. And so by harping only on boxing out, we kind of lose players because they pretty quickly understand it's like this doesn't actually work if I do this. And I've always tried to tie it back to what's our objective here? Like, why do we tell players to box out? What do we actually want at the end? And the goal is to get the ball. And so I think of boxing out as like trying not to lose. It's like blocking the other player and holding them back so they don't get the ball. But by doing so, we also never get the ball because it's too slow. And so I think it's over talked about, right? Overemphasized, but under taught in a lot of ways. Like the mechanics of how to make that work and make it work well and make it work on time and everything that goes into what we actually want to rebound and get the ball is very much under taught. But boxing out is like a cliche that everybody knows you should do and everybody says and repeats without really doing a good job of explaining it to players. And so what I've evolved to calling it, it's not my original idea, but I call it bump and chase, is really just making contact with your opponent and putting your body between them and the ball and then chase down the ball and go get it. And we work a lot on just the anticipation of rebounding. So, I think probably the number one problem I see with all rebounding across all age levels is that when a shot goes up, we turn and stare at the rim. Somebody used the phrase baby bird rebounding. Like we're all staring up at mama bird, waiting for food to drop in our mouth. And that's our equivalent of rebounding. And I think that's, a really good analogy, but it's a very common problem. It's like shot goes up, everybody turns and looks at the room, but we're not able to take in any information about the ball and where we think it's going to bounce until after it hits the rim because of our vision of just looking at the basket. And so for offensive rebounding, especially, we work on the anticipation factor and timing and trying to watch where the ball goes, anticipate where it's going to end up, and arrive there when the ball gets there and try to go get the ball. So bump and chase is kind of another layer to that where I'm first making contact with my opponent because I'm playing defense, I'm inside them. I just want to put my body between them and the ball, and then it's a race, and I'm going to go get the ball first. And this kind of works, at all size and positions, regardless of how far you are from the basket. If you really get players adopting this idea, like, I'm going to get the ball, and all I need to do is stop their momentum for a second and hold them long enough for me to locate the ball and anticipate it, and then I'm off running, can use my speed as a small, scrappy player and get rebounds regardless of my height, which is another aspect of this that I hear a lot from players like, oh, I'm 5 feet nothing in seventh grade, I can't rebound. And it's kind of been the evolving myth that perpetuates itself is like only tall guys rebound, only big guys rebound, and they have to box out in order to rebound. And it's really like if you watch really good rebounders, it's like doesn't matter what their size is, they got a nose for the ball and they got a really good way to anticipate where it's going, and they just work on positioning, which I actually arrived in our rebounding course. I call it the three P's of rebounding, which is predict, which is the anticipation factor, position, which is just bumping long enough to put your body between them and the ball, and then pursue. So predict, position, pursue gets you going after the ball all the time. And then the last aspect I have here is a bust out dribble, which is just connecting when you get a rebound. How fast can you get it into an attack mode to go on offense? because, again, because of the myth of the big guys rebound. But the other side of it is the big guys also should never dribble. We are often taking our best rebounder and then handicapping him until someone who's better comfortable dribbling, takes the ball from them, and then we attack. And meanwhile, the other team got back and got set and got a sip of water and they're ready to guard us, right? We just burned a lot of time in our ability to attack quickly by not allowing guards to rebound or not showing them how they could rebound, and also handicapping our big guys who do rebound a lot from being able to attack and to dribble. So a bust out dribble is really just designed to get out of traffic, right? If I catch it down near the block, I want to bust out and get through the free throw line going toward the other basket as fast as possible without waiting on anybody else. And then maybe I can kick it ahead. Maybe I can handle it one more dribble across half court and find somebody. But basically, we are manufacturing a fast break out of every rebound possible by getting everybody both nose for the ball, trying to go get it instead of just box out, and empowering them to be able to take that one or two dribble bust out and get our whole team into attack mode, really leveraging the element of surprise where the other team was not ready for that quick of a transition. And suddenly we just get more layups at the other end. We get a faster paced offense. We get a lot more better quality shots by not waiting and playing against a set defense. So I think I got ahead of my notes here. We already talked about this a little bit. The box out is too slow for 80% of player positions. Playing not to lose. Yada, yada, yada. I said all this already. Lack of teaching footwork, pivoting, position, timing, and most coaching defaults to just box out louder and more often. They'll get parents in the stands involved. They're all yelling box out, but players are really not able to do it in a way that works for them in the guard-oriented positions, especially. Again, most of this I covered. I guess more specifics outside forearm to chest is what we're looking to bump with. So if I was on the right side of the floor, facing away from the basket, my shooter or my opponent is to my right on the wing, I'm going to use my right arm to bump them. The main goal is to be able to pin them and open to see the middle of the floor where the ball is going to hit the rim fastest. So if I see a shot go up on the opposite side of the floor, I'm going to bump them with my right arm, open my left foot, and now I can have vision and a path to go get the ball. And then again, chasing it down is our goal. And sometimes I'll have to clarify with players like, does it count as a rebound if it bounced on the floor first? And a lot of players will say no. Like they're used to the glorified rebound of the big guy jumping up with two hands as angels sing and pulling it down. And it's right. Well, sometimes it hits the rim and bounces off somebody's fingertip and somebody else's ankle and rolls on the floor. And if you dive on it because you were chasing it, that counts as your rebound. So you should still do that, right? And just getting them chasing or pursuing that ball as the highest value objective can really can change your whole team, honestly. It can be a big transformation of how they're operating. So then the bust out dribble again, it's our best opportunity to attack after a defensive rebound or a steal, which we'll get into again. I think 2 weeks from now, I'll go into my points per shot value, what I like to use to just evaluate efficiency and talk about positive possessions versus negative possessions based on how the ball gets in your hands. So rebound or steal would be what we call a positive possession where you can attack without having to wait on either the ball to go through the net or the referee to touch it. And again, tallest player with the most rebounds, normally he never learns to dribble. So I don't know, Chris Lively down here in Nashua, if you got all your 7, 8, 9-year-olds comfortable rebounding and bust out dribble, then your high school program in about 6 years might be dominant because you got everybody comfortable and capable of busting out every rebound and leading a fast break. And we're starting to see more and more examples of that at the higher levels, like in the NBA. Nikola Jokic now has been the MVP for a lot of years, is very commonly getting a rebound and leading a fast break. And he looks goofy, and they call him the Joker, but he makes two dribbles and figures out a pass, and suddenly they're getting a lot more layups than the other team. And again, I like to tie this back to the opportunities that we miss if we don't have the ability to bust out and get a rebound transition to a fast break quickly enough. we end up playing against a set defense and taking, maybe a 30% shot for a lot of us compared to a 90% layup on a fast break that we could get if we are consistently pushing that attack speed. So then talking about more of that, connecting the defense to offense. I like to call it playing fast and slow. It's kind of a theme I took from a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, if you've ever read that. And then calibrating our attack speed. So this again came from Ron Ecker's philosophy. He had actually broken this out into 7 different possession types and how you should attack, how you can get the best advantage out of each of those. I like to simplify that to really 3 possibilities. So most teams play fast all the time or slow all the time, right? We are a fast break team. So if the ball had to go out of bounds, and referee had to check it in, they're going to fast break. If it's a rebound or a steal, they would also fast break. If the ball was a made shot went through the basket, they would still try to fast break. And really, we end up with just a lot higher errors if we do that fast pace all the time, right? So we're like pushing the pace regardless of what the situation is. And sometimes the defense is set and ready for us, and we just blow up and ran into 2 guys and lost the ball. Sometimes they'll make a mistake and we'll score. But the best way to calibrate this, the best way to get your team on track with what pace they should play is based on how they got the ball. And so a live change of possession would mean it didn't have to go out of bounds. It didn't go through the net and have to be even stepped out of bounds to pass it in or inbound. Steal and rebound are the only 2 ways where it get off the rim or got deflected on a pass into a steal and nobody knew that was about to happen. And so we have the element of surprise. So that is the best opportunity to fast break. And we want to get our team accustomed to that. Anytime it's a steal, right? One of my real pet peeves when I was coaching a team last was we would get a steal and then we'd hold it and like wait for our point guard to come get it. And, the other team was like trotting back and getting set on defense. So definitely a steal. Most players get that. Like if they deflect a pass, they're off and running by themselves, fast break layup, right? That one's probably more obvious than a rebound, which is where we need to do more work on the rebounding side because it's not always as obvious. But we just got a live turnover, change of possession. If we bust out right here, we've got nearly as good of opportunity as we would if it was a stolen pass. The second type is a made shot, right? And so this is like the most gray area between the 2 ends of the spectrum, right? Fast break always on a steal or rebound. I like to say fast break to half court after a made shot. So like other team scores on us, we want to take it out, pass it in, and try to go. But then we want to reevaluate as we get to half court, like, okay, there's 4 guys back and I'm going to slow it down and run some more deliberate offense to create a new opportunity because I'm not going to go crash 1-on-4 or maybe it's 3-on-4, but there's 4 defenders back, right? My fast break, I was pushing it until I could gauge how that looked. And it's not there, I'm going to slow it down. And then the third one that I use is if a referee had to touch it, right? It was out of bounds, it was a turnover, it was out of a timeout, whatever the case was. Referee had to touch the ball. We had to check it in. Defense is definitely back and set and ready for us. So now's the time to walk it up and run a more deliberate offense to get open, right? And so this could go back to our offensive order of operations we talked about last week. We're going to walk it up, maybe try to break a guy down and drive, maybe pass and cut, maybe dribble at, handoff or back cut. We're going to go set up something more deliberate in a slower pace to create a new advantage before we attack. And so this is how I like to explain it to players. Like if you can get both you as a coach thinking this way and your players trained that way, is like always, always, always fast break on a steal and rebound. Try to fast break after a made shot, but walk it up after a referee touches it. And then to the other team who's used to having a single speed, like they're used to being able to identify this is a fast break team. Therefore, we need to always get back, right? Suddenly they're like, they just fast break twice, and this time they're walking it, and that time they went to half court and then slowed down. Like, we're not quite as sure how to guard you anymore because you are varying your speed based on a type of possession, and the other team has no idea why you're varying your speed. maybe they thought you were a half court set offense team, and suddenly you busted out fast breaks because you were getting some rebounds and steals. And it's just a lot harder for them to adapt and defend you because you have variable speed. And again, you have a simple framework here, hopefully that your players can understand so that they're all on the same page of when it's time to go fast and when it's time to slow and when, sometimes it's a gray area and it might be either or. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yep. Perfect.
Have you ever heard it explained that way before?
Nope.
Cool. I think this is a powerful concept that I haven't heard from, I guess, anywhere else other than the mentor I learned it from. But really powerful mentality to give your teams. And for you as a coach to start measuring, where you're having success with different speeds of play. So just calibrating your attack speed out of that strategy, we want to be able to match the situational type of possession we just talked about. We're going to be unpredictable to defense. And I think going back to what we talked about last week with a player sense of control and like autonomy in the game is they're able to recognize and make decisions to control the tempo, right? So I'm sure all of you have had a team or at least a player who always wanted to go fast, didn't fit the situation. They would just bowl into a problem situation, lose the ball instead of slowing it down. Maybe especially noticeable, I guess, at the end of a game, right? It's like we're up by 10 and this one player is like trying to fly down the court and throw up a shot when it was like, actually, we just inbounded it out of our timeout. We want to walk it up and make a more deliberate offense. And so getting them away to recognize this without a word from the coach in a game is like, oh, we just got a rebound. Let's go. Oh, we inbounded it. Johnny's open up there, but I see three defenders back, so I'm going to slow it down and walk it up and control that tempo. So, uh, quick summary. The three pillars again: contain the ball, contest the shot, and rebound. And I focus mostly on the individual side of containing, but there's also a lot you can build into your team defense with that mentality. It's like number one priority, contain the ball. We're gonna double team the drive, make sure they don't ever get in the paint one on one, and they have to kick it back out. And we're going to scramble on defense as a team and make sure somebody's going to contest. It can't be, I thought that was your man. Oh, we both missed it. It's like whoever's closer. It's the rule I like to use. Go get the ball and contest it. And then team rebounding, we can work on. Okay, everybody bump their player, everybody chase, and we're going to recognize, like, hey, those two teammates are going to get it because they're chasing it. So now I'm going to transition to fast break and trust them to handle it. Even if I was normally the point guard, I'm going to get down the floor ahead because I know my five man can do that bust out dribble and we are already running. And then connecting that again to playing speed, calibrating it, and giving your players ownership of how to calibrate the speed of their attack based on the position and the type of possession, the situation of the game. So that's it for this week.